Welcome to another Geek Channel 8. This is the history of film and pop culture. This is another one of our Tarzan episodes. This week we'll be talking about the 1999 Disney animated version of Tarzan. Woohoo!
Whoop, whoop.
I'm Eric.
I'm Nat.
I'm Rosie.
I think it's important to talk about the fact we're talking about the 99 Tarzan in sequence with the other Tarzans. Tarzan Palooza? Would that be a fair assessment? Tarzanageddon?
Oh gosh. I don't know. I just really haven't been watching much TV. Most of our evenings have been consumed this week getting our house fixed up.
Yeah, you've been doing gardening and construction.
I know. I know we've been mad people, but our house looks so much better and it's operational. So I'm not complaining. Still got to work on the room I'm currently in, but that time will come. We have to. I know up next is fixing the plumbing and figuring out other things with that. But yeah, that's been pretty much it. All of the series that I was watching, I have either they took it off of Netflix or it's off for the summer or they couldn't film any more of it because of COVID. So here we are.
Yes,
I'm
we are recording this in the summer of 2020, just
yes.
after in the middle of the summer, while COVID is still a thing. Netflix has just pulled a ton of stuff because they always have their mini streamageddons in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
So, yep, just to give people context as to when we were recording this.
Well,
But
and a lot of the shows are on hold. Like, the production is just dried up, right?
like The Walking Dead is on hold. They couldn't even finish the season because of COVID.
Ironically, The Walking Dead is on hold. You can't make a show about everybody dying during a period when everybody's dying.
I know. What are the odds? And you
I
can't have them all wearing masks because that'll totally date it.
yeah.
Why don't they wear masks on The Walking Dead anyway? Like,
Why indeed, Eric? Why indeed? The whole show could have been avoided.
Because it's a pre-COVID, post-apocalyptic show. That's what post-apocalyptic show. That's what it is.
Oh. You know what show they do wear masks on that production is also halted? The Expanse. And you figure spacesuits would be about as virus proof. Maybe they could just film the entire season as a spacewalk scene, right? Like put everybody in the spacesuit at the beginning, give them each their separate, and just let them interact that way. So I'm not proud.
Mm.
I often I need something on while I work to give myself the semblance of office life again. I don't know that watching is the correct term, but I have been exposed to most of the Warrior Nun series. And it's amazing that we live in a time where brought back from the dead, she becomes a warrior against the undead is almost a played out kind of genre. Like this felt old from inception, and it was. Like, it's nothing fancy. You're not going to get blown away. There is no part of Buffy the Vampire Slayer you have not already been exposed to.
Right.
But it's fun, right? The
Hmm.
stunts are great. There's some good fight scenes. The acting is just enough to bring the action sequences along, and sometimes that's what you need.
yeah.
And in fact, it occurs to me, because this show, I think Netflix produced it. I don't think they just adapted a foreign series like they often do.
Yeah.
But be prepared for an influx of foreign TV. It just occurs to me the other countries are coming back from COVID way faster than we are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
You're going to see a lot of Spanish series dubbed into English. You're going to see a lot of German TV or what have you.
I can't wait. That's going to be
Me
awesome.
either. I'm going to be excited about that.
Well, and that was one of the things that always drew me to foreign cinema is that American stuff, I'm steeped in it, right? Like I grew up with it. You can't foreshadow anything in an American film or TV series without actually giving it away to most people, right? Like
I know, but they always have the obvious scene of whatever it is that's going to happen later. And you're like,
Correct.
oh, I guess I better make note of that scene because something's going to happen with it later.
Exactly.
A little
And
too
when
obvious.
either A, other countries don't do that, or B, when they do that, they use a culturally irrelevant signal to me that I don't get. Either way, the whole thing isn't spoiled, and I love that.
I liked the way Breaking Bad did it because they would focus on just one image, and that
Yeah.
image would be kind of obscure. You wouldn't know what it was about. Like maybe it was like the pink stuffed animal's eyeball floating in the swimming pool.
Yeah.
You know? And so you knew something bad was gonna happen. You just didn't know what that thing was.
Yeah.
Have you been watching Better Call Saul? Have you been watching
Yep.
that at all?
I watched season 1, I think. I have not picked up since then.
Go back and keep watching it. Like, it's still a great show.
It really is.
And I still don't understand what they're foreshadowing, and it's beautiful.
Well, it's gonna break my heart if Kim dies, and it seems like they're like working that toward that, you know. And
Yeah.
what's her name? Sealhorn, the woman that plays her, is just awesome.
She's wonderful. She's absolutely wonderful.
And you just want her to escape, but you know Jimmy's gonna drag her down. You just know it, you know.
I just keep waiting for her to break up with him because she really is a strong, like she's a very strong, a very smart, very strong, independent character.
Yeah.
But she has this very unique relationship with him, and so. But it's interesting because I just keep like every episode I keep watching. As a woman and as someone who has been through some very trying relationships in my life, I keep watching this and I keep thinking, okay, when's enough going to be enough? When's enough going to be enough?
Yeah.
Has she finally? Is this it? Is she really done? Is she going to break up with him? Is this it? Like every episode I watch it, and just you got to keep watching it. You have to keep watching it. That's all I'm going to say.
I mean, it's the prequel to Breaking Bad, and we know
Yeah.
she's not in Breaking Bad, so either she's gonna break up with him, or she's gonna die.
Exactly. And I keep waiting for one of two things to happen, and I'm like, if anything happens to her, I hope to God she like breaks up with him and moves to some fabulous city, opens her own practice, and is successful. But it is Breaking Bad, so we don't know.
Without beleaguering the point too much, can we just take a moment to appreciate the fact that both Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul are about not the good guys? Like, how rare that is.
Well, that's becoming very common, though. I mean, Dexter.
I agree.
I always wanted that. The sad thing is, kind of all the kind of stuff I wanted to see when I was in my 20s is now getting made.
We live in the era of streaming. The economics have changed. Like, we're switched. When we were kids, the big money for a TV show was to make it 5 years and go into syndication.
Right.
The second they realized, and it was well after the turn of the century that they realized the big money, fuck syndication, DVD sales.
Yeah.
And now streaming is kind of an outgrowth of that. That changed the way they produced TV. When they realized Firefly was the biggest thing they'd ever made, and they have sold more box sets of that than anything previous, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
They started having a little bit more leeway in what they put up.
The cinema is based on ticket sales, and nobody goes out to see stuff in the movies for a variety of reasons that I don't want to get into right now. But that made the real money to be in either advertising, which is free TV, or subscriptions, which is pay TV and streaming services. And because they have a constant revenue coming in, they have more money to produce their shows. So they're making shows like Game of Thrones, which are better than what you're getting in the movies, these days, because that's just the economics of it.
I'm thinking about season 8 of Game of Thrones, and I don't want to disagree with what you're saying, right? Like you're total better may be a strong word now that I've seen the entirety of Game of Thrones, but
well, the problem with Game of Thrones season 8 is only the fact that they got ahead of the writer. So they had to then end it without, it'll be interesting to see how the series, the Song of Fire and Ice or whatever it is, how that series ends the way it was naturally scripted to end.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Instead of the way that they're like, oh no, we got to come up with an ending. This is one of the problems that a lot of series have. I was just watching CNN's special series about the 2000s. The first episode, they talk about television. And they were talking about Lost. And Lost was like a hit.
Lost was wonderful. Then something happened.
What happened was they hadn't planned it to become a hit. So they wanted to end it, and they were under contract to go X number of seasons. I think ABC finally told them they could end it after 10 seasons. So they're like, there was literally a writers meeting or something where they told the network, look, we're running out of flashbacks. We can't keep flashing back forever.
Yeah.
We're running out of flashbacks.
Well, and I remember it felt like the wheels came off that series during the writer's strike. There was a writer's strike that was largely over streaming revenue, right? This was right when this was at its nascency, and these guys felt they deserved a portion of that, but, nothing in the contract from years before had predicted streaming as any kind of revenue source. So there was a big strike. I remember they broke the second season of Lost into halves.
Yeah.
The first season of Lost was moody and cryptic and foreboding. And it was really this kind of TV I hadn't seen in America before, where they were alluding to things, but you didn't know. You were afraid. You were apprehensive the whole time.
I think Twin Peaks did it. Like, for me, Twin Peaks was the show that really started that trend.
Sure. Yes. And that's actually, Twin Peaks, The Prisoner, something like that.
The Prisoner, yeah. If you go way back, that's another thing that we should talk about sometime, is how, like, in the 60s, like, with all the experimentation, they almost went that way, and then things regressed back to stupid sitcoms in the 70s. But, like, with shows like The Prisoner...
But the point I'm getting to, Lost, they did this show that came out the first season... I will recommend to anyone. It was amazing. The second season, they did half of a season. They had it written. Then the writer's strike came in, and they did the second half of the season after the strike concluded. And you could tell.
Oh, I stopped watching it.
You could tell the formula had been broken. You could tell that they were just simply adding... They were adding confusion for confusion's sake.
Yeah, it really made me mad, and I never watched Lost after that. So I've never seen past the first season and a half.
You saw the good part.
I always like to start these off where we talk about older media that we've consumed within the recent past. For me, it was Live Free or Die Hard, which was really hard to find, and I wanted to watch it 4th of July weekend because that's when it takes place.
Is that the one where they drive the police car through the helicopter?
That would be the one. Yes. Now, I got to say, I had a love-hate relationship with this particular movie. It was like, I liked that they were not doing the same thing all over again. It wasn't set at Christmas time. It wasn't like a big heist film per se. There was a little bit of that to it, but not really. And it was based off of an article in Wired magazine. One, Justin Long again.
I love Justin
I just have decided if Justin Long's in a film, I'm going to boycott that film. He annoys the hell out of me.
Look, I will take Justin Long over Nicolas Cage any day, because you know what Justin Long doesn't do? He doesn't show up and ruin otherwise great films, which Nicolas Cage does.
Okay, but I still want to smack the shit out of him. And then, of course, there was the stupid trope of the hacker in the mom's basement. Of course, it was Kevin Smith this time, but it was still his buddy. That trope.
And I want to point out, it was tired then, right? Like, it was already tired when this was made. That was, 15 years ago? Something like that.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's get into a movie that has been done. It's been done over and over.
You dodged the word great, Eric.
Now, hang on just a second. Before we start this time, I know Nat's just going to blast all over this. So you have to wait, Nat. I want to have Rosie take us through this, and then you and I can go through our thoughts on it later. So, Rosie, why don't you start?
Okay. Well, first, it seemed to me, of course, it was a very modern Jane. I'm going to go the Jane route. But she was a much more modern, independent Jane. Definitely a period Disney cartoon film was modernized that had the modern day twist. Like every growing up, every Disney princess movie, you could still tell what era it came from, even though it was set in a certain time period. Like, for instance, Cinderella was obviously made in the 50s. You could just tell by the style of animation and everything. But in this case, you could tell because Jane was very independent. She was very smart. She was, she knew what she was talking about, and this wasn't, and it just went kind of a different route because of that. I do like that when they started out, they gave a little backstory about Tarzan, how he ended up on the island in the first place, and how they had the parallel story where the mother ended up being his mom raising him. I thought that was a nice twist to that, and I did watch this film with my older daughter, or with my younger daughter Harmony, and she had seen the film before, but it was just kind of nice to watch that with her and watch her, say, "Oh, I remember that. Oh, I remember that." Or I forgot about that part. I did notice a couple, nest eggs. One of them, when they focused in on the tea set, I could tell that was the exact same kind of tea set from Beauty and the Beast. I have 2 daughters, I have 3 younger sisters, so I grew up watching a lot of Disney films. So I do recognize little nest eggs here and there that they show.
The Easter eggs, yeah.
Yeah, little Easter eggs, yeah. I noticed the nod that they made to the 1932 film when she called him Tarzan the Ape Man. I thought that was pretty cool. And they explained like the knife part when he created the knife and started using the knife as a tool.
So I will jump in here because I've been reading the book. The knife is an important tool for Tarzan in the book. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I mentioned this in any of our other ones that we've covered, but in the book, mm-hmm. it's his intellect to some degree, but also the fact that he finds a knife that allows him a certain amount of power over all the other jungle animals, because he has a knife and they don't, mm-hmm. they don't know how to use it or whatever. It gives him a little bit of a, pardon the pun, an edge. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, yeah, and in the Disney film, he puts 2 and 2 together because he sees the rhino like scrape up the tree, and he has this sharp edge, and he's like, like, oh, I see the rhino do this. I wonder if I could do the same thing with this tool. Does the same thing with the tool, and then all of a sudden he's using a knife now. So, which I guess, yes, his intellect, but he also kind of learned from a rhino.
Okay.
And Clayton is a douche. Just saying. Clayton is a douche. He's a douche in every movie. He's a douche. Or the guy who looks like him. Funny how he looked just like the guy in the characters from the films in the 30s. So I thought that was a nod too.
Yeah. Okay. Shall we break it down, or do you have any overall things you want to say first before we start, Nat? Because I can tell you're dying to say something here.
Before I tell the story of my experience watching Tarzan, I want to talk about something I call the Papa John's effect. Papa John's is the #1 selling pizza in America. And it's not because it's good.
Right.
It's because it's the thing everybody can agree on. They have taken pizza, removed anything potentially offensive. The pepperoni is not spicy. The sauce is not spicy. It is not sweet. The bread does not have an herbaceous element to it. It is the least common denominator of pizza, and they are rolling in cash because of it. This movie reminds me of that.
I thought you were going to say that it reminded you of Papa John's, the great white hunter aspect of it.
We could, please, let's return to that. That is an apt, I didn't even think about that. That's great. But every single problematic theme of Tarzan simply is avoided. There was not a single black person in this movie set in Africa. Just didn't happen. They just didn't talk about it.
Okay, so let me just say that there are large portions of Africa with no people in them, particularly the jungle areas.
But again, we're talking about Tarzan. Black people featured in every one of the movies so far in less than flattering ways, right? Like we've spent weeks talking about this.
Right.
Disney just went the other way. It was like, let's not talk about it at all. Let's just not address that. Let's take a hero that already has this established theme and maybe pull out that part.
Okay, I didn't do the background to the year 1999 like I usually do, so I'm not going to do that now, but I will put this in a little bit of context here. This film for Disney came at the end of the 90s, and it seemed like the end of an era. After this, Pixar sort of seems to take center stage, and computer animated films from the major studios, Pixar being at the pinnacle, but then DreamWorks gets into the action and other studios as well. Also, it seems to be the end of the so-called Disney Renaissance, the time period that we associate with the Disney princesses. This is the first movie where the main protagonist is a man, not a woman. Like all of the ones before it, all their big hits, I kind of give them a little bit of credit for taking a risk this way, because it would have been easy for them to do yet another Beauty and the Beast, yet another, Hunchback of Notre Dame, another Little Mermaid, another, Cinderella type story, which was their bread and butter for the 80s and the 90s. So I just want to get that out there. Also, what's different about this that I liked is not only is it just an adventure story, they don't sing.
No, they don't.
They don't suddenly break into song. And I appreciated that. Even though I will say the music, which was all by Phil Collins, I absolutely hate Phil Collins.
I was so mad at Phil Collins by the end of this. And that's actually literally the second line of my notes is, fuck this music. Is that Phil Collins? That's what I have written in.
Yeah, it's Phil Collins. It's terrible. Even by Disney musical movie standards, it's terrible.
Yeah. And it's unnecessary. It's not a musical film. It is not them telling the story through music. It is them shoving Phil Collins into this movie set in the jungle.
I mean, it's almost like they said, hey, Phil Collins needs a job. Let's have him write the score for this film. We'll keep him in the market somehow.
My buddy Phil, he's having kind of a rough time. Can we get him on the project? Is this something we could maybe have him do? Just write some catchy jingles.
I think it was like, Randy Newman's busy, so we need somebody else.
Randy Newman's busy.
To me, it was the storytelling equivalent of, those guys who'll take cinnamon butter, put it into a big hypodermic and shoot it into a turkey right before they deep fry it. It's like that, but for music, but for animated film about Tarzan. It doesn't have to be there.
I did not know that was a thing. Cinnamon butter in the turkey.
Well, and I didn't know Phil Collins had anything to do with jungle music.
Well, and also, speaking of the lack of people of color in the film, did you notice that in the scene, once they get Tarzan on the boat and he's being made fun of by the guys that are actually like pirates, I guess, and they're giving him a hard time, led by Clayton, did you notice that his skin tone was a little bit darker than it was any other time in the film?
No.
I did not notice that.
It was markedly more tan than it was during the rest of the film.
So did they avoid racism this entire time, just sidestep it, and then kind of suddenly
They sidestepped racism the whole movie.
And then suddenly oh, here you go.
Yeah.
Just
They're like, if you don't include black people, you don't have to talk about racism, apparently.
I would have had a bigger problem if they had black people in, a subservient role and
right.
Better to just avoid the issue, because it's totally believable to me that, you could have a ship of white people land somewhere on the coast of Africa and not encounter any black people. It's totally possible.
This is the formula. This is the formula for using Tarzan in a modern context. And again, we skipped over a lot. We skipped over the 80s. We skipped over the 60s. But from what we saw from the teens and the 30s,
Mm-hmm.
Tarzan isn't something maybe we should be really racing to revive, possibly. We didn't even watch the modern Tarzan. So, yeah, I think I don't have a better idea, I guess is what I'm saying. Like, yes, I can criticize them for just completely sidestepping the history of the character and the problematic themes, but I don't know how I would do that myself.
I still think a baby that manages to survive in the wild to adulthood in the jungle is still a fascinating concept. And I'll say that the things I liked about this, besides the no singing, was the animation was still really incredible. Disney's always really good at has always been good at selling animation, going all the way back to their first film, Snow White. The thing I did not like about the way they portrayed Tarzan was the way he surfed the trees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I found that very annoying, and I'm like, ouch, that would freaking hurt.
You can tell rollerblading had already been invented, right? Like freestyle skating was what they were copying, like the little boardwalk.
It was definitely a skateboard.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did notice a few Easter eggs, the tea set being the Beauty and the Beast tea set. I noticed that. Jane. Interesting take on Jane. Is this a heavily used trope these days or not? The like nerdy girl who...
The thirsty woman trope? Yeah, no, that happens. Like, after a long series of rapey Tarzans, Jane was the sexual initiator in this. She was the one who kissed Tarzan.
Yep, she was.
It was voiced by Minnie Driver, right? I think.
Was it? Okay.
I think so. I'm not sure. Let's get a confirmation on that.
Yeah, my brain shut down at Phil Collins. I missed everything else from that point on.
Yes, Minnie Driver was Jane Porter.
Brian Blessed was in this. I looked at the page the other night, and Brian Blessed was the one that really shocked me. And I don't even remember who he played, but God, I love Brian Blessed.
He played Clayton.
Okay.
And
damn it, he was the bad guy. I love Brian Blessed. He should have been the good guy.
Glenn Close played Kala, which was Tarzan's mother, gorilla mother. All right, time to get into the pet peeves. There were a couple of them. One that they get shipwrecked, right? In this version of Tarzan, they aren't deliberately put ashore by mutineers.
It's like 10 seconds of prologue. Oh no, a storm. Quick, get off the boat. Boom, Tarzan.
Then they build this amazing treehouse. Now, there is a treehouse in the Tarzan novel because they spend the night in the trees the first couple of nights or whatever while they're building a cabin just so they can be off the ground and protected from predators until they can build a more proper house. But in this, they build this elaborate treehouse, and they have the giant, what do you call it, the 2-man bandsaw and all this stuff to build this treehouse with. And I'm like, wait, you thought to get that off of your little rowboat? Like, how did they end up with all this stuff to...
When we were watching last night, Tracy just looked over at me and said, where did they get furniture? Like, where'd
they get the tea set?
Dressers. Like, where the hell are the dressers from, right?
But just, first of all, operating the giant bandsaw or whatever you call, what do you call those big, long saws that takes two people?
The two-man saw, I don't know.
Anyway, that saw, I'm like, they show him the father, Lord Greystoke, using that, and I'm just like, one, how do you use that by yourself? But two, where the hell did that come from? You know, and then they use all these tools to build this mansion in the trees, and I'm just like, okay, so that part really bugged me. There were a lot of things, like I mentioned, like we talked about the knife and stuff, that were truer to the book this time than a lot of other things. But one thing that I really didn't like, and it directly contradicts common sense and the novel, is, all right, Tarzan is a kid and he's raised with the kid gorillas, and he grows up and becomes a man. And like in the story, they specifically mention how they would have given up on him if he hadn't already been a year old by the time they found him, because he took so long to mature, and gorillas mature really fast. So they're like, why is he still an infant? Why is he still... But in this, it was just the opposite. His like sister or whatever, his playmate is a like baby gorilla. And then like eventually he's this grown up and like she's still this little baby gorilla. What was her name? Turk.
Turk, that's right.
Turk annoyed the hell out of me.
And she was played by Rosie O'Donnell.
Turk annoyed the hell out of me.
Let's look at the main thematic difference really quick, if we could, about this film. This wasn't about Tarzan, right? This movie was about the apes.
Yeah.
Tarzan was amongst them. But the story itself was about the apes. This was daddy issues, right? This was Tarzan dealing with the rejection by his adopted father or not adopted father, or however that... Yeah, this was about the apes interacting with each other, and this was about Jane showing up, and less her reaction to her father. Like, didn't have much to do with that. He was there. He was there. But this was really a movie about the apes using Tarzan as a trope, as something people already knew about to move the ape story forward, right?
Right.
And at that, it wasn't unclever, like it wasn't unfun. They just pulled one element they knew people would relate to and put it into a movie about apes. And that's fun. There shouldn't be anything wrong with that, except that the character is problematic. And we tell stories like this. We create problems, we create monsters to anthropomorphize problems we have. And something you said earlier, Eric, about the foundling, raised in the wild, that is a timeless story. And I think you're right. But we don't write those stories anymore because the wild isn't a problem we actually have. It's not a thing we need to personify so that we can defeat it. The foundling story is a tale of a person that comes from the wild. Like, they are born of humans, they are left to the wild, and then they emerge from it victorious. But the wild itself isn't an element we even consider anymore.
Yeah, well, we talked about that in the very first Tarzan we did, how, like, the world is now small and not unexplored like it was when these characters were created. But I think it works if you're talking in a retro period. Like, this Tarzan was a period piece. It did not take place in 1999 when it was made. It was retro to the 30s or something, right?
To that vaguely Victorian era of...
Yeah, vaguely Victorian, yes.
They also deftly dodged the entire element of colonialism by being scientists. Oh, we're just here to study gorillas. They just like, oof, we're not here to exploit the natural resources. We're not here to mercilessly oppress the villains. Absolutely were. And you know what? Props for getting white people so right? Like,
well, Clayton, here's an interesting thing I wanted, because it ties back to our talk about other stuff with this. The whole plot in this, which isn't in most of the Tarzans that I've seen or heard about. Of course, there's been the ivory plunder, but this one, they wanted to take whole animals. The whole point was to capture these gorillas, which, again, to tie us back to Tiger King, that is a long-running theme. That was a running theme in that Netflix documentary, how valuable jungle animals were alive, to zoos and stuff like that. So it's not something that is completely dead or left back in the Victorian period or the 1930s or whenever. It's still a thing.
Yeah, I could see where, the popularity of environmentalism was kind of an underlying theme in that too, where, that they were protecting the apes. and they were there, just there to study. And, of course, we find out later that Clayton had an ulterior motive because he just happened to have a ship on the way to take away all of these live animals. And, apparently they tried to take Tarzan too, but that was unsuccessful.
Yeah, this movie, secretly just about the apes. And, gaining acceptance from your reluctant father. Those are the two themes. Everything else is just flavor.
And, just like a classic Disney film, they always have to add the romantic aspect to it and make things more romantic than they probably really were. At least in this one, they didn't throw in a love story just to throw in a love story like I've seen happen in other Disney films. But, it still happened and it was still kind of corny.
That actually raises a really good question. How vital is Jane to the Tarzan story? Is she the central element? Or was that just thrown in to make it a love story? And this, again, I guess I'm asking across the entirety of what we've seen, all of them. Would Tarzan still be Tarzan if there wasn't that tempering element in it?
I think that Tarzan, the origin story of Tarzan, which is what we've been watching over and over, requires Jane. She is the go-between between modern society, which he, in a lot of cases, doesn't really care for, and his jungle background. But can you have a Tarzan movie without Jane in it? I think there were many.
Yeah.
I think it's possible, but you got to pick up the story later. Like you can pick up the story after Jane, but if you
like after the divorce, when Tarzan's 45 and he's sitting at home and he's like, I got to get out of the house, so he returns to the jungle.
I just mean after he has been westernized a little bit,
Yeah.
And that westernization it requires Jane. So that's my take on it.
Well, and also Jane is his connection to human beings, and when she comes on the scene, which obviously Disney touches on this more in the movies from the 30s, didn't even touch it. They took a different aspect to it, but when they touch on it in the Disney film, it's more like he knows he's different. He doesn't know why he's different, and then people show up on to the jungle that look like him, and she's part of that, and he hasn't experienced the opposite sex of his species, and so she's fascinating to him, and that makes him question who he is even more. When you go back to the films in the early 30s, I think the fascination lies in the mindset of what they thought of women back then. Women were accessories. They weren't supposed to have an opinion. They weren't supposed to be sexual. They were playthings. They were there to have babies and raise children and do everything around the house while the man went off and made a living. And also, obviously from the films in the 30s, they thought that women could be bought with things, with material things. So the thought of a woman deciding on her own that she's going to stay in the wild, and continue to live her life and just leave all of these material things that she can supposedly be bought and paid for with behind is just mind blowing. So, and still to this day, like, would you leave your creature comforts and go live somewhere completely different? Would you really do that? There is kind of a fascinating aspect to that. And so that's kind of where, where Jane falls in. It's like, there's this exotic man from the wild raised by animals. Would a modern day woman be attracted to that? Would a modern day woman love someone like that so much that she would just like leave her whole entire life and live in trees the rest of her life? Would she do that? It's kind of a fascinating angle to look at least to me.
Can I just point out, this is just now occurring to me, the person that went and did possibly the most seminal primate research, like the most important single person's contribution to our understanding of how primates work, Jane Goodall.
Exactly.
Dun, dun, dun. Would a woman leave the modern creature conference and go to the wild? Apparently. You don't have to be named Jane, but man, what a happy coincidence.
Right. She found her passion and went with it.
Yeah. Well, and think about I want to say, I'm going to guess she went to school in the 40s, maybe the 50s. How much of a pain in the ass does it have to be to get your doctorate as a woman in America at that era? And I'm not saying it must be nice to escape all of the social nonsense and just do really advanced scientific work, but man, it must have been nice to escape like the entire patriarchal overarching structure of academia and just fucking do the most important work that's ever been done on a subject.
Right. And to be honest, after dealing with huge caseloads of sexism like that, amongst the educational elite, I'd want to escape to a fucking jungle too. That's all I'm saying.
So, yeah, a couple other bits of trivia I found out here while we were talking. I've been looking this up online. It turns out that the model for Tarzan's motion, like through the trees and all that, was supposedly Tony Hawk.
Oh, cool.
There we go. It was skateboarding.
It was skateboarding.
But I feel like I'm still mad at Disney, Eric. I think, yeah.
Oh, there'll be more opportunity. We're going to do more Disney films. This is not the end all be, and this is by far not the most annoying Disney film.
No, it is not.
Far more annoying Disney films. This actually falls in the middle of the pack somewhere, in my opinion. But
yeah.
That's horrific.
By the way, if we ever go over The Little Mermaid, I don't even need to watch it. I know that by heart, and I can sing every song in my sleep. My sisters watched that nonstop when we finally had it on VHS growing up.
Au poisson. He, ha, ha, ha. Love to cut and to jump little fish. First I cut off their heads. It won't hurt because you're dead. And you're certainly lucky you are, for it's going to get hot in the big silver pot for the little le poisson. Au revoir. Yes, I can sing. I love The Little Mermaid. I love the little that's like my favorite of the
I've
Disney
never seen
animated.
The Little Mermaid.
What?
I have never seen The Little Mermaid.
Oh, it's the best one, man.
Yeah.
It's I like it because, the prince is Eric, and
I mean, there's that.
And The Little Mermaid's hot, and she can't talk. Perfect feminist movie right there.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah,
anyway, I kid.
Yeah, we could
I
go
kid.
down that road, but we better not go down that road today.
No. Okay. All right. Any last thoughts, Nat?
I don't know what kind of suffering Phil Collins has earned for doing this, but I know he has earned some suffering. There's maybe like a 12th circle of hell where you just have to listen to your work over and over again. You just have to hear your own voice for all of eternity and regret it, right? Like,
Agreed. Rosie.
I don't really have much. I still think Clayton's a douchebag. I'm glad Tarzan and Jane are living happily ever after in the forest, skating the woods like Tony Hawk. Good for them.
Why did the dad jump off the boat at the last second? Like, how creepy is it now for you and your new jungle wife to be living with your new jungle wife's father?
I don't know. He's cute, and I'm a daddy's girl. So, like, if my dad did that, I'd be like, okay, you can live with us, but you have to live in a separate cottage.
Right? There have to be walls. There have to be, like, sound dampening walls.
Yeah, this is your corner of the jungle, Dad, and this is our corner of the jungle because, there's some things we don't want you to hear. So there's that.
It's the jungle.
You're going to hear some things that sound like slapping.
Not jungle sounds.
They're just wood chopping, all right? Just stay over there.
They're different kinds of screams.
We'll have to get into that in a future one. If we ever come back to Tarzan, we got to get into the sex angle because it underlies, like, it's not even subtle. Anyway.
It's not.
Okay. I want to remind everybody that you can tell us how much you hated us or whatever at GC8. That's letter G, letter C, number 8 podcast. All one word, GC8podcast at gmail.com. Be sure to like and subscribe. Give us 4 or 5 stars, whatever the maximum number of stars is in the
Infinite
iTunes store.
stars.
Infinite
stars.
Stars for days.
Surrender your stars unto us.
So, yeah, we aren't asking for money right now, but we are asking for people to tell everybody about us. And one of the ways people can find us in the iTunes store is if we have good ratings and reviews. So if you like us, please do that. That's the best way you can help the show. And until next time, this is Eric.
This is Nat.
And this is Rosie.
Take care.